سحر گلشن کون دیکھے، دشت طیبہ چھوڑ کر شہر گلشن کون دیکھے، دشت طیبہ چھوڑ کر سوئے جنت کون جائے، در تمہارا چھوڑ کر سوئے جنت کون جائے، در تمہارا چھوڑ کر سر گزشتے غم کہوں کسے تیرے ہوتے ہوئے، سر گزشتے غم کہوں کسے تیرے ہوتے ہوئے، کس کے در پر جاؤں تیرا آستانہ چھوڑ کر، کس کے در پر جاؤں تیرا آستانہ چھوڑ کر، مر ہی جاؤں میں اگر اس در سے جاؤں دو قدم، کیا بچے بیمار غم پر بے مسیحا چھوڑ کر، کیا بچے بیمار غم پر بے مسیحا چھوڑ کر، بے لقائے یار ان کو چین آ جاتا اگر، بے لقائے یار ان کو چین آ جاتا اگر، بار بار آتے نہ یوں جبریل سدرا چھوڑ کر، بار بار آتے نہ یوں جبریل سدرا چھوڑ کر، بخشوانا مجھ سیاسی کا روا ہوگا کسے، بخشوانا مجھ سیاسی کا روا ہوگا کسے، کس کے دامن میں چھپوں دامن تمہارا چھوڑ کر، کس کے دامن میں چھپوں دامن تمہارا چھوڑ کر، حشر میں ایک ایک کموں جو تکتے پھرتے ہیں عدو، حشر میں ایک ایک کموں جو تکتے پھرتے ہیں عدو، آفتوں میں پڑ گئے ان کا سہارا چھوڑ کر، آفتوں میں پڑ گئے ان کا سہارا چھوڑ کر، ایسے جلووں پر کروں میں لاکھ حوروں کو نثار، کیا غرض کیوں جاؤں جنت کو مدینہ چھوڑ کر، مر کے جیتے ہیں جو ان کے در پہ جاتے ہیں حسن، مر کے جیتے ہیں جو ان पे जाते हैं हसन जी के मरते हैं जो आते हैं मदीना छोड़ कर जी के मरते हैं जो आते हैं मदीना छोड़ कर मर के जीते हैं जुल के दर पे जाते हैं हसन जी के मरते हैं जो आते हैं मदीना छोड़ कर।
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, welcome to day 2. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Just a reminder for those who were here yesterday, and anyone who was not here yesterday, then please try and observe the housekeeping rules. An important one is to ensure you have a pen and paper on hand to make notes. And today's lesson you will have to listen attentively because we will be talking about matters that are not easy to understand. Okay, a reminder for what we covered yesterday from the fiqh of zakat, and you need to keep this in mind whilst we study the rest of the course. So the benefactor is the one who gives the zakat, yani upon whom it is obligatory to pay the zakat. That person must be a Muslim, must be baligh, must be aqil, must be free, and must have complete ownership of his assets or her assets in order for that person to be liable to pay zakat. Okay, so bear these conditions in mind. Anyone who does not fulfill these conditions, they do not give zakat. Okay, so in terms of the course content, we have already covered section 1 and 2, and inshallah today we'll be looking at the section number 3. And if there is enough time, then we will be looking at section 4, in which we will discuss blockers and non-blockers. Okay, so section 3, assets. So now that we've understood and determined who the benefactor is, if a person fulfills those conditions that we talked about in the section of benefactors, then we will look at his assets. If his assets are zakatable, then he will have to give zakat. If not, then he won't. So in the assets section, we have 3 conditions. So any asset, for it to be zakatable, it has to fulfill 3 conditions. And when we say assets, we mean property and wealth. So anyone who has property, anyone who has an estate, anyone who has any form of wealth, if it fulfills these 3 conditions, then only then the person will be liable, or his wealth and assets will be liable to payment of zakat. So as you can see, the first one says nisab, and the word nisab is generally translated as a threshold, and it means an origin or a base. And the Arabs say raja'at al-umuru ila nisabiha, Yani all matters return to their origin, yani to their base. So nisab is a base, it is a threshold, and we shall discuss that in a moment. The next condition says hawl, and the word hawl means a year, the passing of a year. And this is not the hawl in la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. That hawl means power. And when we say la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, it means there is no power, there is no strength, but with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's not the hawl we mean here, although it is the same word. The meaning is different. So hawl here is the passing of a lunar year. So when we are talking about a year in the chapter of Zakat, it specifically refers to the lunar year, yani the year based on the moon. And the third condition says numu. And numu is growth, yani something that is growable. Only then will it be zakatable. So we'll look at each of these conditions in more detail. Okay, so the first condition for assets is nisab, and it is very important that you do pay attention and listen and observe with complete attention, because many people fail to understand the concept of nisab in zakat. So nisab is the minimum amount of assets liable to payment of zakat. If the assets are less than the nisab, then they are not zakatable. Okay, even if a person fulfills the conditions of the benefactor, if his assets do not reach the nisab, which is the threshold in zakat, then his assets will not be zakatable, yani he will not have to pay zakat. In Islamic law, there are 4 different nisabs, and they are gold, silver, trade goods, and livestock. And in gold and silver, trade goods, and livestock, they have to ensure they fulfill all 3 conditions that we have shown you previously in the chapter of assets. So gold, silver, trade goods, livestock, all of them have to possess, they have to reach the nisab, they have to have hawl, yani the passing of a lunar year, and they have to have numu. We'll talk about that as we move on. Okay, so this is the nisab of gold, and you will have to pay attention. Again, I keep stressing that attention is very important here. But the nisab of gold in our sources of Islam, yani the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the aqwal of the fuqaha kiram, is 20 mithqal. And the mithqal is of gold. So when someone's gold reaches equivalent to 20 mithqal, only then do they have to give a zakat from that gold. Now, in today's age, 1 mithqal is 4.365 grams. And I have based this calculation of mithqal on Mufti Abdul Wajid Sahib, Mufti Azam Europe, alayhi rahma. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower mercy on his grave and elevate his status. From his Fatawa Europe, I have taken his calculation. He has written that 1 mithqal in today's day and age, based on the calculation done by Imam Ahmad Raza radiyallahu ta'ala an, is 4.365 grams. And that means that 20 mithqal will be 87.37 grams. So the nisab of gold is 87.37 grams. And that's what you want to take note of. Okay, so nisab of gold, and I'll point it out here. This is the nisab of gold, 87.37 grams. And that's what you need to make a note of. Nisab of gold in price, for someone who doesn't want to extract gold from their collection of gold and give that gold in zakat, and they want to give the value, then in that case, they will look at the price of gold. So the price of gold will be based on where the gold is. So if you have gold sitting in the UK and you want to give your zakat in Lebanon or India or Pakistan or wherever else, then you will have to consider and use the price of gold in the UK, in Preston, because that is where the gold is. So what we consider is where the assets are. The price of the assets will be based on the place they are in. Okay, if they are in no man's land, and this masla has been mentioned by the fuqaha kiram, then we will consider the closest man's land, yani the closest city or town, and then use the price of their market. So if you have gold and you are in a country or other than London, as you can see at the bottom, it says this is the calculation based on Hatton Garden, London, and the price of gold there yesterday was £38.24 per gram. So we will times that by the nisab of gold, and that gives us £3,341.03. Okay, so that is the mithal, that is the nisab of gold. Yeah, just to mention to you lot that we have sent messages out to people that you will need a screen to observe the course. So if you are using your mobile phone, then unfortunately you may not be able to see the screen clearly. So you will require a screen to follow the course. So the nisab of gold is £3,341.03. That is based on 87.37 grams of gold. This is for the UK, and the price of gold fluctuates every day and it changes based on the place you are in. So you will have to consider the price in your country, in your city. Okay, so when someone has gold, and if it's in weight 87.37 grams, then they will have to give 1/40th of it, which is 2.5% of that gold in zakat. Thereafter, one of the laws in Islamic law from the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that which is above the nisab, so I'm looking at this here, that which is above the nisab and less than a fifth of the nisab is not zakatable, which means it's forgiven. And that means that when someone has anything above 87.37 grams, as long as it is less than 104.84 grams, they only give zakat on the 87.37. That rest of it in the middle is forgiven. So if you were to times 104.84, yani 38.24 pounds by 104.84, then you would get the figure of £4,009. So that would be where you have to pay on the whole £4,009. However, that which is less than £4,009 and more than 3,341, you will not have to give zakat on it. So there's a leeway of £668 in between. And that £668 is forgiven in Islam. It's not zakatable. Okay?
Clarify if it's the buying price or the selling price.
Yeah, the important point here is that we will only consider the selling price of the gold. So if you were to sell your gold, then that is the price you would get for your gold is what you will pay on. And there's some rules coming up, so I think we might cover that, and there is a few more rules regarding that. But at the moment, if you just understand that the nisab of gold is 87.37 grams, that is when you have to give zakat. If it's less than that, you don't have to give zakat on that gold, unless there are other rules that we will look at. Okay, anything above 87.37 grams is not zakatable until it reaches 104.84 grams. After that, once it reaches 104.84 grams, you will have to give zakat on it all. Anything more than that, you don't have to give zakat on it until it reaches 122.31 grams. Once it reaches that much, you have to give zakat on it all. And in the same manner, anything more than that, you don't have to give zakat on until it reaches 139.78. So the rule is there above, which says on the right, that which is above the nisab and less than a fifth of the nisab is not zakatable. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the nisab of silver. So I don't know if you lot recollect, but we did read a hadith in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that from 40 dirham you must give 1 dirham. However, there is no zakat on 190 dirhams until it reaches 200. Yani the nisab of silver is when it reaches 2 dirhams, and dirham is a coin of silver. And again, the working out is from Mufti Azam Europe, Mufti Abdul Wajid Saab alayhi rahma, from his Fatawa Europe. He has worked out that 1 mithqal is 3.05 grams or 3.06 grams. And therefore, 200 dirhams will be 611.62 grams. And I have chosen Mufti Abdul Wajid Saab's calculation because it is less. And if people are giving zakat on that amount, then it is more beneficial for the poor rather than using the 620 grams or 618 grams other people have worked out. Same with the gold, the nisab of gold, where it says 87.37. Some people have said 88, and there are different opinions. But these are the ones from Mufti Azam Europe. So 200 dirhams are in weight, in today's weight, 611.62 grams, which means that when someone has 611.62 grams of silver, then that silver is now zakatable. The price of silver in Hatton Garden in London yesterday was 0.42, so 42 pence per gram. And if we times that into the nisab, then that tells you the equivalent value of the nisab of silver is £256.88. And this figure is very important in zakat. So please note down this figure, £256.88 for those in the UK. And it will slightly change depending on where you are in the UK. For those people who are in other countries, then you will have to find out from your local market how much you could sell your silver. So if you had silver and you wanted to cash it in the market, then how much would you get for it? And if what you need to find out is how much would you get for 611.62 grams. Okay, and that is what the nisab of silver is. Again, same rule as gold, that which is above the nisab and less than a fifth of the nisab is not zakatable, yani it is forgiven. So anyone who has 611.62 grams of silver, that is zakatable. Anything above that is not zakatable until it reaches 733.94 grams. That means that if you were to times 733.94 times 42 pence per gram, then you would get 308.25. So 308 pounds and 25 pence. Yani the difference of 51 pounds and 37 pence is forgiven. Okay, so once you have 733, or you can say 34 grams, then you have to pay zakat on it all. Anything more than that, until it reaches 856, is forgiven. And in that manner, you would work out your zakat. But the important point here is the 2.5% of 51 pounds is just above a pound. And therefore, the idea should be that you just give zakat on anything. Even if it's the forgiven part, anything above 611.62 grams, just give zakat on it, just for that 1 pound and a little more. There's no need to be very technical in this matter, because it is not like namaz, where in namaz you perform 4 rakats and you think, you know what, I'm going to pray 5 rakats. Why not do some more worship? Then that's not permissible, because namaz is a set prescription from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on which you are not allowed to add. However, in zakat, the rule is different. The more you give, the more rewarding it is. Okay, so moving on, that is the nisab of silver. Just a few rules that are important to understand. The weight and not the value is considered in the nisab of gold and silver. Okay, so when you are working out the price of gold or the price of silver that you have accumulated, then you will ask regarding the weight and not the value, because you might have jewelry and the jewelry might be a designer piece or a designer set, and the value of that might be a lot higher than its equivalent value in weight. And therefore, it's important to understand that it's the weight that we consider in the nisab of gold and silver, not the value. Okay. Moving on, jewelry will be weighed and not valued for their design. So that's just an explanation of the previous rule. So we will weigh how much we have, and that weight will be considered. We will not look at the value of the design. Okay, next rule says the nisab of gold is only considered if someone has no other assets apart from gold. And this is the important part in nisab. When someone only has gold and nothing else, no other assets at all they have is gold, it is only then that they will use the nisab of gold. Okay, it's important to understand this. As soon as someone has more assets, yani other assets other than gold, then now they will merge all their assets and then work out the total value. And in that case, they will use the cheapest nisab, which is silver. And that's why I told you that it's very important to note the nisab of silver, which, if we go back, is £256.88. So the rule says the nisab of gold is only considered if someone has no other assets apart from gold, which means that if someone has gold and silver, they have both, then they will join the two nisabs and they will use the nisab of silver. It is permissible for someone who wants to keep a record of separate nisabs. The initial Hanafi fiqh is that every nisab be kept separate. So gold nisab will be separate, silver nisab will be separate, trade goods nisab will be separate, livestock nisab is separate. However, that which is more beneficial for the poor is that you just merge all the nisabs and you work out the total amount you have and then extract 1/40th, yani 2.5% of that, and give that in zakat. And that is easier for the people and also more beneficial for the poor, because someone may have gold which is less than 87 grams. Let's say somebody has 60 grams of gold and they have lots of silver, and the silver is more than the nisab, the threshold. Let's say they have 620 grams of silver, then that is zakatable. But their gold is less than the nisab, so they have gold which is only 40 grams. Then in that case, do they give zakat on gold? The answer is in the presence, the fuqaha kiram, the latter Hanafi jurists have given fatwa that in the case of someone possessing more assets, they will merge the assets. So there, what the person will do is they will find out the value of their 40 grams of gold and join it with the nisab of silver, work out the value of 620 grams of silver and then add the total and give zakat from that. And that's what this rule is saying. So if we read that again, it says the nisab of gold is only considered if someone has no other assets apart from gold. Okay, in the presence of another asset or assets, the equivalent value of the nisab of silver will be used and considered because it is less and hence it is more benefiting for the poor. One of the rules that are used in zakat is ma anfa lil masakin, that which is more beneficial for the masakin, for the destitute or for the fuqara. And that's why we will use the nisab of silver, because it is easier to reach that, and zakat, and that will benefit the poor people more. So the understanding of this is if someone has plenty of gold and it has reached the nisab and they have other assets as well, then they will merge that and they will give zakat 2.5% of that. If someone doesn't have enough gold to reach the nisab of gold, however, they have a £5 note in their possession, they own that £5 note, that is all they have. Now, they have money and they have gold. So in that case, they merge the nisab of gold with money and use the nisab of silver. Okay, it's very important to understand this. Because they have more assets than gold, they will merge the two nisabs and they will use the nisab of silver, and they will give zakat on that gold as well. Okay, so that should clear the understanding of anyone or misunderstanding of anyone, whereby someone thinks that if I have gold less than the nisab, yani 7.5 tola as we know it from the subcontinent, then I don't have to even think about that gold. That's not true. You have other assets, and therefore you will have to work out the weight of that, even if it's less than 7.5 tola, and you will have to give zakat based on its value. Okay, moving on to the last point, it says in the case of joining two nisabs. So when we have joined two nisabs, silver and gold, or money and gold, the value, yani currencies and gold, the value of the assets will be considered even if they are gold and silver. Okay, this is an important point because we said that the weight and not the value is considered in the nisab of gold. So if you are merging the nisabs, then now you will not consider the weight, you will consider the value of the gold you have, which simply means that if you have a designer set, then we will look at the value, because now we are not dispensing the zakat or distributing the zakat based on the nisab of gold, and therefore we will not look at the weight anymore. So the weight is only considered when you are dispensing or you are distributing the zakat from the same jina of the nisab. Okay, but if you are merging different nisabs together, then now we will look at the value of the total rather than the weight. Okay, I hope everybody's understood that. That's the nisab of gold and silver. And with gold and silver, it is important that I mention that all currencies, yani those that are known as thamane istilahi, so gold and silver, they are known as thamane haqiqi, yani they are in reality used for trade. Currencies, they are in Islamic terminology, they are classed as thaman, yani they are used for trade, and therefore all currencies will use the nisab of gold and silver, whichever one is less. And in this case, it is the silver. So if anyone has any currencies, whether it's dollars or Sri Lankan rupees or Indian rupees or Pakistani rupees or kwachas or any other currency, they will have to use the nisab of silver. And once they have 256 pounds 88, as you can see there, of currency, then they will give zakat on that. Moving on to trade goods. Trade goods is the same as currency in terms of the nisab. It says here there is no separate nisab for trade goods. The equivalent value of the nisab of gold or silver, whichever is less, will be considered and used for trade goods. Okay, so the nisab of trade goods is silver. The equivalent value of the nisab of silver, which is again 256 pounds, as you saw before, and you should have noted. So if someone has trade goods, okay, let's just read the rules. It says the nisab of silver is far less and therefore will be the nisab one must use for trade goods, and the same with currencies. Okay, the nisab of silver is far less and therefore it will benefit the poor more, and that's why we use the nisab of silver. This means that when a person has trade goods that are valued at 256 pounds 88 or more, then they are zakatable. Okay, and remember there are more conditions which we will look at in the next slides. So whenever someone has trade goods and they reach in value 256 pounds 88, they do become zakatable. And the last rule again reiterates what I've been saying. In the presence of assets from different nisabs, yani you've got trade goods, you've got gold, you've got silver, you've got currency, they will all be merged and the value of the silver nisab will be used. Okay, so as soon as your total assets from the nisabs reaches 256 pounds, and when it is more than that, in excess of that, then that all will be zakatable. Yani 1/40th, 2.5% of that will have to be given in zakat. Okay, moving on. Okay, this section has been added on just to give you an idea of the concept of zakat in livestock. So it may not be relevant to everyone, but I do know some people that it will be relevant to. And if there are more questions from Freyhead, for example, then please do contact me after the course or your local scholar and get more information. Here I've just mentioned briefly, just to give people an idea, the listeners an idea of how zakat works in livestock. It says here, animals which spend most of the year grazing on land, yani pasture land, and their purpose is yielding milk, breeding, or fattening, such as camels, cows, and goats, then they are regarded as grazing livestock. They are only zakatable if at least one of the animals is of a year in age. Yani the rule is initially that every one of them should be 1 year old at least for it to be zakatable. However, the scholars say that if any one of them has reached the age of 1, then the rest of them will also become zakatable following that one. Yani tabi and matbu. So those of you who are students of fiqh, it is related to the discussion of tabi and matbu. Yani that goat which has, or that camel, or that cow, or that buffalo, or that sheep that has reached 1 year in age, then the rest of them will be tabi to that and will be zakatable. Okay, animals that are for service, such as servicing in the fields, yani they are being used to water the fields or plow the seeds, plowing, etc. They are known as animals for khidmah, and they are not zakatable. Similarly, those animals that are there for transporting goods, they are not zakatable. Those that are there as pets or for riding on, they are not zakatable as well. Animals that are bought with the specific intention to be sold, they are classed as trade goods. So then you will refer back to the previous slide, and they will be the nisab, they will follow the nisab of silver. Okay, so that includes dairy farms, poultry farms, etc. And the slaughterhouses, they will be classed as trade. And sorry, the animals that are specifically bought to be sold, they are classed as trade goods. As for dairy farms, poultry farms, etc., are classed as trade. They are classed as trade. However, the animals in that case will be classed as asbab of tijara. Yani they are the means of trade. So it's not that they don't have to pay zakat on the value of their animals unless they are being given in trade. Okay, so if, for example, somebody has a dairy farm in which they are farming animals just for milking them and selling the milk, then they are doing a trade in milk, then they will only pay zakat on the milk profits from the milk. And if they've got any milk there, then that will be zakatable, but not the animals. Okay, so dairy farms, poultry farms, that's the rule for them. Animals that are for consumption are not zakatable. If someone's farming animals just to eat, then they are not zakatable. Okay, so those people who are familiar with countries in India and Pakistan, how they graze animals and they just look after animals and farm animals simply for yielding milk and breeding and fattening them, that is what we are talking about. So how do we give zakat on them? What is there? There's no specific nisab like gold, silver, and trade goods, etc. Their nisab is in this manner. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly said that there is no zakat on camels less than 5. So if someone has less than 5 camels, then they will not have to give zakat. If they have 5 camels, then they will have to give 1 goat or the price of 1 goat in zakat. If they have anything more than 5 until 9 or until 10, they will not have to give any zakat. Once they have 10 camels, then they will have to give 2 goats in zakat. Yani either give 2 goats or the value of 2 goats. Yani if they were to sell 2 goats in the market, how much would they sell for? That's the value, that's the amount they have to give in zakat, and so on. As you can see, once somebody has 25 camels, that's when they would have to give one camel in zakat. And a female camel is called a cow, and a male camel is called a bull, and a baby camel is called a calf. Okay, so 1-year-old calf, female, has to be given in zakat when someone has 25 to 35 camels that are used for grazing. As for cows and bulls and buffaloes, there is no zakat on cows, bulls, or buffaloes if they are less than 30. Okay, and that's the way someone would give zakat, and I've just put it there. And if I've not specified whether they have to be male or female, then that means it doesn't matter whether they give one calf that is of 1 year in age, whether it's female or male, doesn't matter. Okay, and that is for goat, sheep, and rams. Other animals are not zakatable unless they are for trade. Okay, so deers, for example, a deer is not zakatable unless it is for trading purposes. If someone is specifically buying deers to sell, then they will be classed as trade goods. Similar to horses. Horses are not zakatable. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ clearly said in one of the hadith, if you can recollect, that horses are not zakatable. However, if someone is buying and selling horses, similarly donkeys or mules, etc., then they will be zakatable as trade goods. Okay, so that's the end of nisab. And now we will be looking at haul, because haul is related to nisab. And one of the conditions for zakat to be obligatory on assets is haul. So haul, what does it mean? Haul means the passing of a year. And I'm going to explain this, so please pay attention. In wujubu zakah, yani the obligation of zakat, there are two categories. One is nafsul wujub and the other is wujubul ada. Nafsul wujub is the initial obligation, and the wujubul ada is the obligation of fulfillment. So for example, we generally say that namaz is obligatory upon every individual. Okay, is Fajr namaz obligatory? Yes, of course it is. It is obligatory. That is the initial obligation, which we call the nafsul wujub. However, it's wujubul ada, which is the obligation of fulfillment, it only occurs when the time of Fajr occurs. So at the break of dawn, wujubul ada will occur, and that is when someone will pray the namaz. So the offering of namaz, although it is obligatory, its fulfillment is not obligatory, or its offering is not obligatory until the actual time enters. Okay. Similarly, in zakat, the nafsul wujub will be upon anyone who has the equivalent amount of nisab or the nisab itself, and they fulfill the conditions that we have looked at in the benefactor. However, the wujubul ada is after 1 year passes, and that's what haul refers to. Haul refers to when the distribution becomes obligatory, and that is after the passing of a year. So if we look at the rules mentioned here in the points, it says initial obligation of zakat, which is the nafsul wujub, occurs as soon as an individual earns any asset which reaches its nisab threshold. Okay, so as soon as someone becomes the owner of one of the nisabs, or if it's trade goods, then the person has trade goods which are in value £256 in the UK, then zakat has become obligatory on that person. Yani nafsul wujub has occurred. However, wujubul ada will only occur after the passing of a year. So if you read the next point, it says if a child already owned such assets, yani a child had lots of money in their child trust fund or their bank account or saved by their parents or guardian, then the date he or she reached or reaches puberty is the day zakat is initially obligatory upon him or her. Okay, so as soon as the child reaches the age of puberty, nafsul wujub occurs. Similarly, if a person accepts Islam in the state that they own such assets, and is someone who is a wealthy person, accepted Islam, then immediately on that day, zakat becomes obligatory. This date is very important and must be noted down. Okay, so the first time you got your salary, the first time you started working and you got your salary, and that was the first time you earned or became the owner of £256 because your parents had never given you anything, or if you had received something from somewhere else and you became the owner of that amount on a specific date, then that date is your beginning of year. That is when nafsul wujub, the initial obligation of zakat, occurred upon you. It says after that, because the obligation to distribute the zakat, which is the wujubul ada, the obligation to distribute the zakat will be exactly a lunar year after that date. Okay, so this is the important part. Nafsul wujub, wujubul ada, the initial obligation and the obligation to distribute the zakat. Yani distribute meaning to dispense, to discharge the zakat, to take it out from your wealth and give it to the poor. That's the wujubul ada. The nafsul wujub is when it's become wajib. So when, as soon as you have become the owner of nisab, zakat becomes fard upon you. However, its fulfillment, yani its distribution, is only obligatory upon you after one lunar year has passed. Okay, so not the solar months. We're not going to use the solar date, it's the lunar year. And I will explain that in a moment. And we will look at examples, so don't get worried if you've not completely understood. There is more explanations coming. It says here, each person who fulfills the conditions of the benefactor, yani someone who's a Muslim, the person is sane, they fulfill the other conditions that we mentioned, the 5 conditions we mentioned, must distribute zakat from his or her wealth exactly a lunar year after she became an owner of a nisab or any zakatable assets equivalent in value to the nisab of silver. Okay, so if someone only has gold, the first time they became the owner of the nisab of gold, then they will note that date down. Exactly 1 year later, if they have that nisab or anything above it, then they will have to give zakat on it. If someone had more than gold, or someone had trade goods, or someone simply had currency, and as I said, currency will be the same as gold and silver, and in our case we will use the nisab of silver. Anyone that became the owner of money, whether it's gifted to them, whether it's gold or silver that's been gifted to them, they became in ownership of it, they will note that date down as soon as they had enough that reached the value of £256 if they are in the UK. 1 year exactly after that, they will see, do they still have that nisab of £256? If it is less than that, then zakat is not necessary. If it is still the same or more in excess, then they will give zakat on that. If you look at the next rule, it says, if at the end of the year the person does not own any zakatable assets that reach their relevant nisab, then zakat is not obligatory. The person will then wait for another year to pass and evaluate in the same manner. Okay, so that date will still be looked at the following year. And if then they have the nisab, then they will give zakat. If then they don't have the nisab again, then they will not give zakat until the next year. The only time they will reset their date in the year is when they become bankrupt, when their balance reaches 0, they have nothing, or they go into minuses. Okay, and as a point there, it says again, if mixed assets, then use the nisab of silver in value. The last point on this slide says, if after the initial obligation of zakat and before the passing of the lunar year, the person loses all assets, yani their balance goes to zero, then the person is absolved of the initial obligation. So the nafsul wujub does not remain upon them anymore. And thus there is no obligation to distribute the zakat. Okay, so if the nafsul wujub is not there, then the wujubul ada will not remain at the end of that year. In that situation, the person will cancel their date of their year, and they will wait for the day when they become the owner of the nisab again. And once they become the owner of the nisab again, they will note that down, and that will be their new date. And that will be nafsul wujub. And then 1 year after that will be their wujubul ada. And here, thanks to Nizamuddin, we have got some examples to enhance your understanding or to ensure you completely understand this. It says here that Ahmed became Sahib Nisab in the month of Safar 1441 and saved throughout the year, so that in Safar 1442 he had £2,000 in his bank. How much zakat should he pay? So if you just observe that this is the amount of money he has, and this is the zero line, and that's the minuses, and let's say this is the 256 threshold. The dotted line above the blue line here is the nisab, and let's say that's £256 value of silver. As you can see here, Ahmed just before Safar was in ownership of below the nisab. So he hit the nisab, the red dotted line, in Safar, in the month of Safar. And let's pick a date, the 1st of Safar. 1st of Safar, Ahmed became Sahib Nisab. And throughout the year, he kept accumulating more and more wealth until came 1 year. So the nafs wujub, yani zakat, became obligatory upon him here on the 1st of Safar 1441. However, the obligation of distribution, or the obligation to distribute the zakat, yani the wujubul ada, will only occur once he reaches the 1st of Safar in 1442. And as you can see, he now owns £200. How much zakat should he pay? Can any one of you tell me how much zakat he would have to pay in this case? Okay, the simple way of calculating this is dividing £2,000 into 40. Okay, because remember, it's 1/40th. The fraction 1/40th is 2.5%. So all you have to do is divide 2,000 into 40, and it comes up as 50. That means that Ahmed would have to pay, thank you, Muhammad Patel, he has to give £50 in zakat on the 1st of Safar 1442. Any delay is sinful. Okay, if he thinks that I'll give it in Ramzan, there'll be more reward, in fact, there will be more sin. So he must not delay the right of the poor. Okay, moving on to the next slide. It says, again, Ahmed became Sahib Nisab in Safar 1441. So this is not Ahmed, the previous Ahmed. That one was Ahmed Patel. This one is Ahmed Bashir. So Ahmed Bashir became Sahib Nisab in Safar 1441. Throughout the year, his bank balance fluctuated and even fell under the £200 threshold. He ended the year with £600 in his bank. How much zakat should he pay? Okay, again, if you guys can help. Okay. Okay, so that's enough time for you lot to work it out, and thanks to someone who has told us that it will be £15. Yani it will all be zakatable. Okay, all of that will be zakatable, £600, even though in the middle of the year he has gone below the threshold. Okay, so what we're pointing out in this specific example and slide is that even if someone goes below the threshold in the middle of his year or her year, then they will not take that into account. They will only take into account what they have at the end of the year. Okay, so the beginning of the year and end of the year is what we consider. So again, for you can probably see here that the line, the person Ahmed Bashir became Sahib Nisab not on the 1st of Safar, but about the end of Safar, let's say 29th of Safar. So he will have to give zakat on the 29th of Safar the following year. Okay, one more example. And again, this is not Ahmed Bashir or Ahmed Patel. This is Ahmed Chaudhry. Okay, Ahmed Chaudhry became Sahib Nisab in Safar as well. Okay, in Shawwal, he was in negative equity. He went below the threshold, not only below the threshold, in fact, he went into minuses, negative equity. However, at the end of the year, the following Safar, yani 1442, he had £1,000 in his bank. How much zakat will he pay? Again, can someone help us with this? Okay, I'll give you guys a moment. Okay, the answer to this is that Ahmed Chaudhry will not give any zakat in Safar 1442. Okay, so all of you are incorrect. I will refer you back to this slide here. The last point on this, it says, if after the initial obligation of zakat and before the passing of the lunar year, the person loses all assets, then the person is absolved of the initial obligation, and thus there is no obligation to distribute. Okay, so Ahmed Chaudhry, although in Safar 1441, Nafse Wujub occurred, yani zakat became obligatory upon him, but the distribution was not obligatory upon him yet. It was going to happen the following year. However, here, just at the end of the year of 1441, he has gone below £0. Yani he has lost all his assets, he's gone into minuses, and therefore the Nafse Wujub has not remained anymore. He will now cancel his obligation of zakat, and he will wait for the next time he becomes Sahib Nisab. And as you can see in Muharram, Ahmed Chaudhry became Sahib Nisab again. So here again, Nafse Wujub occurred, and this is the new date he will now use, which is the 1st of Muharram. 1st of Muharram 1442 will be now the Nafse Wujub for Ahmed Chaudhry. He will have to pay zakat the following Muharram 1443. Okay, that is the understanding I am trying to pass on to you. Okay, I am going to assume that most of us have now understood this, and I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, here we have a few questions that may have risen in your minds. Yeah. Someone may ask, what if I don't know the date I reached the Nisab? And that is a very common question. Unfortunately, it is our madaris that are to blame, that our madaris should teach our children before they become baligh this concept of zakat, and how as soon as they reach baligh, they need to know the fiqh of zakat and to note down the importance of noting down the date of when the nafs wujub of zakat will occur upon them. Okay, the initial obligation of zakat will occur upon them. Unfortunately, many of us did not know that when we became baligh, and when we gained that much money. Was it a birthday when so many of my uncles, aunts gave me gifts, or was it my first salary that made me reach the nisab of silver, or whatever else people know? So the answer to that is, using all your knowledge, intellect, and available information, you will estimate until you feel satisfied. And once you have estimated a specific date, you will use that as your date of giving zakat, and then give extra money for more satisfaction. Until you are satisfied, give extra in case you have not calculated your date correctly. The next question says, can I wait and pay my zakat in Ramadan? And we have answered that question in section 1 at the end of Quran and Hadith, where we learned that it is sinful to delay one's zakat. The person actually becomes mardudu shahada, and the person becomes a fasiq. It is haram to delay the distribution, and you will be considered a fasiq for delaying the zakat. Instead of more reward, you are accumulating more sin. In the month of Ramadan, a good deed, you are rewarded many folds more. Similarly, a sin is punished many folds more. So you are not getting more reward, you are accumulating more sin. So the more you delay, the more sin you are accumulating. And we also learn from the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that namaz, salah, your fasts, your hajj, if you have performed it, it will all be held pending until your zakat is discharged or distributed. Okay, the next question, can I pay my zakat in advance? The answer is yes. Yes, zakat can certainly be given in advance, and there is no limit to how much in advance it can be given. Extra payments can also roll over for the following year. Okay, and upon this, as I mentioned before, not like namaz. You can't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to pray my Fajr, Zahar, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and then I'm free all day. That's not how it works. Namaz has to be prayed in its given prescribed time. In zakat, that is not the case. You can give your zakat in advance. Okay, if someone has paid, let's say someone was due to pay £2,000 in zakat and they paid £3,000, and they can have it rolled over for the next year. Okay. Okay, what is the question about Ahmed?
Suppose Ahmed went in minuses in Muharram. No, but in Muharram he became Sahib and Nisab. We still have to pay zakat.
Yeah, so we've already answered that. So if you go back into the slides, I did say to you that Ahmed Chaudhry, because he has gone into minuses, the nafs wujub has not remained. Therefore, he will have to cancel his date, reset the date until he becomes Sahib Nisab again. And I did quite clearly mention that in Muharram here, he's become Sahib Nisab again. So he will, nafs wujub will occur, and wujub ada will be exactly 1 lunar year after that. So Muharram 1443 is when he will see if he has wealth that is above the nisab. If he does nisab or above, then he will give zakat. Okay. Any other question? What if somebody uses this loophole to avoid zakat? Yeah, so if someone is using a loophole, then the answer to that is, what do you have to say about someone who thinks he is tricking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Someone who is trying to fool Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what would you say about that person? It is haram, and if the intention is ma'adallah to fool and trick Allah, then it's kufr. And therefore, one must not do such an action whereby they would gift all of their wealth before the end of their year and tell the person that, look, I'll gift it to you, so it's not mine anymore. After that day, you gift it back to me and my new year will start, and I won't have to give zakat. That is haram to do that. Okay. So the final condition is numu, and I know that we have reached 1 hour. However, I am going to go into that because it should not take us long. Numu means growth. And for assets to be zakatable, numu is a condition. Numu, just answer and speak to him. Numu is something that is growable. And what do we mean by growable? There are two types, and one of them is khilqi and the other is fi'li. And khilqi means that something that is naturally growable. One, yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it to humanity specifically for growth, yani for trading purposes. And that is gold and silver. Currency is also regarded as naturally growable, although it is not given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that reason, but man has made it as an artificial way of trading. So actively growable is everything that is other than gold and silver and currency. Okay, so trade goods, they are actively growable. What that means is your trade goods, they are actively growable. They are male nami. And if you have something sitting at your home, like a wedding dress of a female who has got married and she still has a wedding dress which costs thousands of pounds, and she has it sitting there and she's never going to wear it again, so it's not from her hajat asliya, but it's not actively growable. It's not a trade good. And therefore the condition of numu does not apply to it, and therefore it's not zakatable. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Livestock is again actively growable. It says here, goods are only classed as trade goods if at the time of purchase the intention of trading was made. This intention can be explicit or implicit. So anything other than gold, silver, and any other currencies, it will only be classed as trade goods, yani it will only fulfill the condition of growth if at the time of purchasing that product or good, the intention of trading was made. Okay, very important point. An implicit intention, yani either you've made a clear intention or you've not clearly made that intention. So if it's implicit, what does that mean? An implicit intention of trade while buying goods is, for example, trading with the company finances. So if you're using the company money to buy something, then that's implicitly intending to buy trade goods, buying them for selling. After that, it says any transaction which has no exchange, yani there's no exchange from both sides, cannot be classed as trade goods. And this is an important one because I think people will have this question in their mind. Even if the intention of trade is made at the time of the transaction, the intention of trade in this instance is invalid. For example, when one receives a gift or inheritance or charity. Okay, so if someone has received a gift, then if it's not currency, okay, so currency is an exception. We're talking about trade goods. Currency is naturally growable, and therefore it is zakatable. As for any other goods other than currency, then they will have to be bought with the intention of selling. So if someone has given you a gift or you have received a house in inheritance, and even at the time of receiving that inheritance, you make the intention that I'm going to sell this house. That's the sole reason why I'm taking it. I'm going to sell it on. Or the gift that you've received, that intention is invalid. They will not be classed as trade goods and they will not be zakatable. Okay. Okay. And I clearly mention again, reiterate that those things which are naturally growable, like gold and silver and currency, they are not included in this. If you receive them as gifts, they are still zakatable. Okay, moving on. It says, if at the time of purchasing an asset, the intention is mixed, I may sell it on or I may keep it, or I'll use it, but if I am offered a good price, I'll sell it, then this is not zakatable. Okay, so for example, someone, he buys watches, the very expensive watches, and when he is purchasing this watch, he makes intention that I'll wear it and if I get a good price, then I'll sell it. Then that's a mixed intention. And in that case, that watch will not be zakatable. If someone buys a house, and at the time of buying the house, their intention is that I may give it on rent, I may sell it, then that is again a mixed intention. It will not be zakatable. Okay, the only time it is zakatable is if you have the sole intention at the time of purchasing of trading, and that's the end of the condition of growth. And just to give you a bit of background of that, for those of you who are interested in principles of fiqh, the basic rule in Islamic law is when it is an action, it is a fa'il, then for that fa'il, for that action to occur, intention has to be there at that time. To abandon something, to abandon that act, intention is not necessary. Okay, so I'm going to mention that again. To begin an action, intention is necessary, and to leave an action, intention is not necessary. For example, if you are sitting at home and you make the intention of traveling, do you become a traveler? No, you don't become a traveler. Okay, no matter how many times you say sitting in your home, 1,000 times, I'm traveling, I'm going, I'm leaving, you are not a traveler until with the action, the intention joins. Okay, so when the action and the intention, when you actually leave the home and the outskirts of your city, only then will you become a traveler. But to become a muqim, as soon as you arrive at a place and you say, I'm going to stay here for 14 days, for more than 14 days, then you have now become a muqim. To abandon an action, intention is not necessary. But to begin an action, intention is necessary. Similarly, if someone made the intention to sell their wedding dress, okay, so I'm going to refer back to the wedding dress example, or anything else that you have sitting in your home. It's not a trade good, it's a book in your house, or it's a table in your house, a bed in your house, or a wedding dress, or shoes, designer shoes, whatever they are. You have now made the intention that I want to sell this. I'm going to sell this up to the extent that you've picked it up and taken it all the way home. All the way to the shop, and you've put it on display in the shop. Because with the intention of selling, the act of selling has not occurred, it will not become a trade good. Okay? So until you don't actually sell it, it will never have been classed as a trade good, and therefore it will not be zakatable. And that's the reason why the only trade goods that are zakatable is when you have made the intention of selling it at the time of purchasing it. Okay? And the reason why a mixed intention will cancel the product or asset from being a trade good is because in niyat, ikhlas is necessary. Okay, so if the intention is solely for selling on, for trading, only then will that product be zakatable. And because the action of buying with the intention, the fa'il and the intention have occurred together, only then will it be classed as a trade good. And if the intention is merely on its own and there's no action, it will never become a trade good. Like the book sitting at your house that you want to sell, you've made an intention, I'm going to sell this because I've got 2 of these books, and you've actually taken it to the bookshop, put it on display, it will not become a trade good, and therefore it will not be zakatable. Okay? And that is the end of them 3 conditions. When an asset fulfills the 3 conditions of number 1, it reaches the nisab. Number 2, 1 year passes on it. Number 3, growth. It is growable. Only then will zakat be wajib or obligatory upon them assets. And here I have put a list of zakatable and non-zakatable things. And we will discuss this list inshallah tomorrow. Okay, but every part on this list will be compared to the previous slides and then determined whether they are zakatable or not zakatable. Okay, like a residential house. If we just look at the first word on the list, the first one is currency. If currency reaches the nisab, if a year has passed on it, and is it growable? It's naturally growable, and therefore zakat will be given on it. A residential house, is the value of it, does it reach the nisab? Yes, it does. Number two, the second one, has a year passed on it? Yes, it has. This is my home, I'm living in it for many years. The third condition, is it growable? No, it's not, because it's not a trade good, and therefore it's not zakatable. Okay, in that manner, we will discuss this list tomorrow. So I'm going to close for the day. We have looked at the conditions of assets today, and we have finished the section 3, but we will look at the zakatable and non-zakatable assets with section 4 in blockers and non-blockers, which we will discuss tomorrow, inshallah. Okay, so just bear with me one moment. I'm just looking for the end. Okay, so any questions? I'll open up the floor. I will give you additional time if there is more questions.
You see the questions.
Okay, so please do bear in mind that we are still yet to cover a lot of things like blockers and non-blockers, which we'll talk about debts and mortgages and things like that. At the moment, we want to try and stick to what we have covered and ask questions regarding that. As I said yesterday, that if you have asked a question which we have not yet covered, then we will not deprive. I don't want to deprive you of knowledge, so I will still try and give you a answer.
Someone buys houses, keeps saying their children's name, and gives it on rent. Is the value of the house zakatable or not?
Yeah. If it is a rental property, then the rental property is not zakatable. It is classed as a hajate asliya for the trade. It is regarded as an initial need for the trade. And the rental income, yani the profit that you make, that is zakatable. Okay, and that goes with any other rental property, whether it's furniture you are renting out to people, then that furniture is not zakatable. That is regarded as an initial need for your trade. And the profit that you gain from the rental income of your tools or furniture, etc., that rental income is zakatable. So if the conditions apply to it, so if it reaches the nisab, if a year has passed on it, then only then it will be zakatable.
Can you pay zakat on the money you have loaned someone every year, so you don't have to pay it all at once when you get the money?
Yeah, if you have loaned money out to someone, then that is in your ownership, and you have the right to demand that money back anytime according to Islamic law, and therefore you are in complete ownership of it, and you will have to give zakat for it every year. However, the wujub ada is only when you have received either 1/5 of that loan or the amount of nisab or all of it. Only then you have to, wujub ada only becomes obligatory upon you. Yani the wujub ada only occurs once you've received a minimum of 1/5 of that loan or that which is equivalent to the value of a nisab. However, the best practice is to just give zakat on whatever you've received when you've received it. But when you do receive it, you will have to give zakat on the previous years. There is an explanation for that we will give later on in the last section, which is distribution. And however, if somebody does want to give the zakat every year, then yes, it is a best practice because it reduces the confusion at the end when they've received the loan back. So the simple answer is yes, you may give your zakat every year.
Mortgage, you answer.
Yeah, go on.
if someone has 100k mortgage debt living in that home, does this debt minus against assets to account nisab?
Yeah, so this is a masala that we will discuss tomorrow regarding mortgages, whether it's a blocker or not.
If one buys a property thinking that I may give it to my children, or I may put it on rent, or I may sell it, does one have to give zakat?
Yeah, merely intention will not cause that property to become a trade good, because at the time of buying, the action of buying, at the time of buying it, the intention was not solely and only to sell. Therefore, after that, any intention made after you've bought the house with the intention of renting out or giving to your children, after that, if you make any intention, it will not become zakatable until you actually do rent it out. Then you will have to pay zakat on the rental income. If you sell a watch or personal clothes and the money sits in your bank account, at the end of the lunar year, would one need to minus the value of these sold goods as they were not trade? No, so trade goods are zakatable, we've been talking about. Now the trade good has not remained in this case. However, you have currency, and currency is zakatable itself. So you will have to give zakat on the income you have received from what you have sold. Okay, so the money that you receive for it is zakatable, but the actual product that you sold, the watch that you sold, which was not a trade good, that will not be zakatable. I am a builder. I have not been paid my profit yet, but know I will be paid soon. Do I add that to my current year's zakat, although I have nearly completed the work? Yeah, so upon the completion of work, you will be due your payment. So until you have not completed the work, you are not liable to pay zakat on that payment, unless you have received it. If someone has already taken possession of a payment and they've not yet finished the work, then that will be zakatable. If they've not received the payment yet, then it will not be zakatable for them. If the value of a designer jewelry containing gold and diamond and stones is considered, then would the diamonds and stones be considered zakatable? Yeah, so in the case that you are merging nisabs, you will consider the value of the gold you have. And if you have gold that has diamonds and stones in it, and they have a separate value, then in that case you may exclude the value of the diamonds and stones, because they are not zakatable. Okay, so the only time diamonds and pearls and precious stones are zakatable if they are trade goods. Yani at the time of purchase, if the intention of selling on and trading was made, only then will they be zakatable. And if that is not the case, you have received this gold as a gift or you've bought it to wear, then them diamonds and stones are not zakatable. You may minus the value of them from the gold you have. Okay, so dead stock, if they were bought with the intention of trade, so if they are trade goods, then dead stock will still be zakatable if they have a value. So you will have to check the current stock, the current market value of them. If you were to take them in the market and sell them, how much money you would get. So yes, of course, you may not get the intended amount at the time of buying them, but now we will consider the price of them now. If you were to sell them now, how much would you get? If you were to sell them as a job lot, how much would you get? If that is the only way you can get rid of them as a job lot, then you will consider the job lot price. However, if it is possible to sell them individually, you will consider their individual value and add that up. Okay, so it is zakatable. If father was paying previous year's zakat for us, but without our knowledge or permission, do we repay now that we are aware? Yes. If the father was paying the zakat of baligh people without their intention, because it's the father, paying the zakat of a child and the father does have the right of spending their children's money, the zakat will be valid. Okay, so the money of the child will be, as long as the child is baligh, and even if the child was not baligh and the father still paid it, it's still fine. The father has the right to spend the money of the children. However, if he is paying zakat from the child's money, then he is violating the right of his children when they are not baligh, because they are not obliged to pay the zakat. If one person decides to remove zakat every Ramadan and keep it as its trigger date to calculate zakat, irrespective of whether you have owned the assets for a lunar year or not, I presume it is fine. Yeah, it is fine if you are not delaying your zakat, because if your lunar year ends before Ramzan and you are delaying the distribution of your zakat to Ramzan, then that will be impermissible. However, if your lunar year ends after Ramzan and you are giving your zakat in the month of Ramadan, then that is absolutely fine. As we said, that you can pay your zakat in advance. Okay, we'll take one more question. Okay, can I pay my previous year's zakat? Yes, of course, you should pay your previous year's zakat as soon as possible. A person has £5,000 cash intending to use for Hajj. Does this cash need zakat paying on it? Yes, again, until you have not actually used that money for Hajj, it is still zakatable. Okay, so yes, that £5,000 you have saved for going on Hajj, it is zakatable. If I pay zakat in advance, but my prior payment is underpaid by accident, can I simply add on what I owe later? Yes, of course. You may add anything that you have given less, you should give as soon as possible. Do we pay zakat for our current balance or what was with us from this date last year? You will pay zakat on your current value of assets at the end of your year. Okay, which is the beginning of your year and the end of your year. So the date on which you became, when nafs wujub occurred, wujubul ada, the date when wujubul ada occurs, yani after the passing of 1 year, at that time, whatever you've already spent has gone. That's not zakatable. What you have left now is what you give zakat on. If someone has not calculated and paid the zakat in the previous years but has paid sadaqah, will this be enough for his previous year's zakat? If someone pays sadaqah, yani nafl sadaqah, voluntary charity, throughout the year and has not made the intention of zakat, then that will not be zakat. They will still have to pay zakat. Okay? That will not be regarded as zakat. And we will talk about that in the final section, which is distribution, inshallah. So, jazakumullahu khaira for today. Thank you all for attending. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward us with knowledge that is beneficial and give us the tawfiq to act upon our knowledge. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from knowledge that is not beneficial. And may Allah protect us from not acting upon our knowledge. Jazakumullahu khaira. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.